A family of three rushed towards the quarantine wall in panic, with a horde of zombies closing in behind them. However, the guards on the wall not only refused to open the gate, but also aimed their guns at the three survivors. Since the zombie virus outbreak, there has been no compassion between people. This is already the third city to be sealed off in recent years. At first, the authorities did not completely abandon the survivors here. They set up a massive shelter at the sports center, and as long as residents went there to get vaccinated, they could leave the quarantine area by bus. Because the vaccine was very effective, even if bitten by a zombie, as long as one injected a dose daily, there was no need to worry about turning into a zombie. To save a media company on the brink of bankruptcy, reporter Mike, along with his beautiful partner Lucy, risked their lives to come to the shelter in the quarantine zone. They originally planned to gather some sensational news, but it wasn't as chaotic as they imagined. With nothing else to do, Mike interviewed the most attractive woman he could find. Afterward, he prepared to check out the vaccination tent, while his partner wandered aimlessly around the square. Suddenly, a resident's body shook, and then without warning, collapsed to the ground. Lucy happened to capture this scene, and when the resident sat up again, she had turned into a mindless zombie. Lucy raised her camera to film the other, but found that the number of zombies was increasing, and the entire square quickly descended into chaos. Meanwhile, Mike was secretly filming in the medical tent because a survivor who had just received the vaccine suddenly collapsed and started convulsing violently. A doctor hurried over to check, only to find that the person had turned into a zombie. In just a few breaths, several more zombies appeared in the tent. Mike frantically dodged left and right, quickly exiting the medical tent, only to find chaos outside. At this moment, Lucy was planning to drive away but couldn't see any sign of Mike. Just then, a zombie lunged at him, and in a panic, he simply floored the gas pedal and drove away from the scene. Poor Mike watched the car's taillights gradually disappear, and one can imagine his frustration. Suddenly, he saw the beautiful woman he had interviewed earlier, so he immediately ran over to team up with her. Screams occasionally came from the square, and Mike stole himself, following the beauty over the bridge railing. Although this place was away from the chaotic crowd, there were still quite a few zombies wandering around. The two of them fought while retreating and finally came across a car, but the female driver was kneeling on the ground, motionless. The beauty Kelly hurriedly went forward to inquire and learned that the woman was looking for her missing dosa. Seeing the zombies gradually approaching, Mike and the others forcibly pulled the driver into the car, stepped on the gas, and quickly drove towards the outside of the stadium. Mike had many questions in his mind, and hurriedly called his superior at the TV station. He had just witnessed someone being injected with the antibody vaccine, but they still turned into a zombie. Just then, a zombie suddenly appeared in front, and the female driver lost control of the steering, causing the car to veer off the road. The three of them immediately jumped out of the car. Kelly ran in front and was the first to hide in a pawn shop, with Mike and the other person following closely behind. After dodging the zombies, they quickly shut the door. Although they had once again survived a crisis, the three of them were in a state of turmoil. It's important to know that this was an official quarantine zone, and the crisis they faced was not just the zombies. Kelly reminded the two to find some weapons for self-defense. Even if there aren't any ready-made ones, they can use their imagination to map their own. Meanwhile, Mike's reporter partners they'd already driven to the entrance of the quarantine zone. However, according to the rules, only officially certified buses are allowed to pass. Lucy quickly showed her journalist credentials, and the armed guard was hesitating about whether to let her through. A few more survivors ran over from the front, followed by a large group of zombies. The guards quickly retreated to the quarantine wall and began shooting the zombies from a distance. The three survivors stood at the door pleading continuously, but the lead guard refused to let them through, saying that the zombie virus could be transmitted through the air, and who knew if they were infected. Seeing that the three people were unwilling to leave, the guard directly pointed his gun at them. Lucy was stunned, but was quickly dragged into the quarantine tent. At this moment, Mike's core came through. Upon learning that residents near the quarantine wall would be mercilessly shot, the three of them were shocked. How could they escape the quarantine zone? Mike plans to gather as many news clues as possible. As long as he proves his value, the company definitely won't let him die here. The news of the vaccine's failure caused a sensation once exposed. However, the pharmaceutical company quickly clarified that their vaccine was not the problem. Rather, the virus had developed resistance in the human body. Inside the quarantine zone, Mike is still tirelessly conducting interviews, mentioning his daughter with tears in his eyes. He said Yellow Person is a girl who loves to dance. Until one day, I was bitten by a zombie. Although I injected the antibody vaccine every day, I eventually turned into a zombie. At that time, Sister Jing was very scared and fled her home in a panic. By the time she realized and ran back to check, her daughter from the experiment was already nowhere to be found. Sister Jing felt extremely guilty, believing she had abandoned her daughter. Late at night, Mike was awakened by the sound of shuffling footsteps. It turned out there was a zombie passing by the door. However, when he turned his head, he unexpectedly saw Kelly secretly injecting the antibody vaccine. Unexpectedly, the other person was also a virus carrier. Confirming that Kelly showed no signs of turning into a zombie, Mike quietly put down the hammer in his hand. He was extremely curious, though, why Kelly's vaccine injection was effective, while all other infected people turned into zombies. Lucy couldn't figure this out either, and could only let Mike find the answer himself. Just after they hung up the phone, several guards suddenly rushed into the tent. Lucy was from the quarantine zone and had to be checked for the virus. After a night of agonizing waiting, the test results finally came out, and there was no virus in his body. Nat, the quarantine supervisor, with a stern face, signaled Lucy to quickly drive away from the camp, but Lucy wanted to continue investigating. At this moment, several military vehicles drove into the camp, and a fully armed squad of soldiers disembarked. The leading major told everyone that they were here to quell the viral disaster, and would execute a bombing mission in 48 hours to level this quarantine area. Early the next morning, Mike and others in the quarantine zone learned of this bad news through the television, and they were completely panicked. Kelly no longer hid anything. She said the vaccine she injected was not from the clinic, but obtained from a distributor, which might be why it was effective on her. However, she only had one dose left, and even if the bombing didn't come, Kelly would turn into a zombie first. At this moment, there was a commotion outside. A group of biker thugs stopped at the store entrance. They didn't care about the threat of the zombie virus and were quite satisfied with the current situation. The leader, Negan, brazenly walked into the pawn shop and immediately took a liking to Mike's homemade weapon. The people behind the pillar were extremely nervous. Kelly swiftly pointed a gun at Negan's head, but she only threatened him to drop his weapon and had no intention of shooting. Mike was curious and only found out after asking that Kelly's gun had no bullets. Fortunately, Negan didn't make a fuss after leaving, but continued looting other shops with his gun. However, the three of them had a disagreement. Mike wanted to make a video to let everyone know the vaccine still worked, but Kelly just wanted to find more vaccines to prolong her life. Sister Jing, in order to find her daughter, rushed out to the store with Kelly. Mike could only reluctantly follow, but unexpectedly, more and more zombies gathered on the street, and his homemade weapon quickly became ineffective. Unable to fight and unable to escape, Mike could only rely on abandoned vehicles to maneuver with the zombies. After circling around on the car roof, he successfully hid in an alley and locked the entrance with a screwdriver. Mike secretly breathed a sigh of relief, thinking he'd escaped the zombie pursuit, but unexpectedly, a clown zombie appeared ahead. With its unrecognizable steps, it was definitely a boss-level presence. Mike used all his strength, but was still completely overpowered. To make matters worse, the zombies outside the alley also broke through the blockade. Just as Mike was in a desperate situation, a car drove up and smashed the clown's head. It was Kelly and Sister Jing who had arrived. Mike felt a lump in his throat. Once again realizing the importance of teamwork, he decided to put aside the den task of exposing the news and help Kelly find the vaccine first. However, the group searched two various pharmacies but did not find the model that Kelly had. Just when everyone was at a loss, Mike received a message from Lucy. He found a military flyer in the camp. All local supplies had to pass through a transport storage warehouse, which must have a large stock of antibody vaccines. Without hesitation, the group drove there. Pushing open the heavy door, the three of them walked into the empty warehouse. Sister Jing was instantly attracted by the doll on the ground. She recognized it as her daughter's favorite. Following the island to the innermost room, she unexpectedly found many zombies imprisoned inside. Sister Jing immediately recognized her daughter in a dance costume. Seeing her daughter's ferocious appearance, she felt no fear. Instead, she silently stepped forward to embrace her daughter, determined not to abandon her this time. On the other side, Mike and Kelly also found a large batch of antibody vaccines. Unfortunately, these were ineffective products used in the shelter, and the zombie tied up nearby was the best evidence of this. With their only hope shattered, Kelly's emotions were somewhat collapsing. In this moment, Mike actually soldered through. Since the militia is going to flatten this place tomorrow, they might as moment the public see more of the truth before it die. Kelly nodded in agreement. The two people entered the office one after the other. As he was about to turn into a zombie, he injected himself with a vial of antibodies meant exclusively for the shelter in front of the camera. The results proved that it was indeed useless. Until Kelly used her last dog, her condition rapidly improved. But before Mike could send it, a horde of zombies appeared outside. The two of them quickly ran out of the office, moving forward along the corridor, only to find a dead end when they opened the iron door. They were completely trapped here. Mike forcibly calmed himself and sent the previously recorded video to the TV station. Once the news was broadcast, it caused a huge reaction. Now everyone understood the truth. It turned out that the antibody vaccine failed, not because the virus developed resistance, but because the vaccine was swapped. Partner Lucy called immediately to congratulate, only to learn about Mike being trapped. She hurriedly contacted the colonel, hoping the military would send a team to rescue him. The colonel nodded with a stern face and decided to restart the evacuation plan. Lucy was delighted, believing Mike was definitely saved, but she didn't know he was facing an even greater crisis. The gang of bikers roared into the warehouse, which turned out to be their base. Seeing the zombies that had somehow flooded in, Negan calmly instructed his men to surround and kill them in batches. And Mike and the other person, trapped at the end of the corridor, unsurprisingly became prisoners. The man was knocked out on the spot, while the woman was dragged into the office. Kelly knew what she was about to face, so she pretended to cooperate. However, this little trick was quickly seen through by Negan. It turned out her rough exterior was just a disguise, and she had already planned everything in her mind. Negan intended to blow up the detestable quarantine wall before the military's bombing arrived, because in her view, any area ravaged by zombies was territory she could control. At this moment, Mike had already woken up from unconsciousness. He found his hands tied to a forklift, with zombies continuously swarming around. A biker gang member was nearby, eagerly waiting for the show to unfold. Mike was furious, blocking the zombies while thinking of a solution. Seeing a zombie with the dagger stuck in it, his eyes suddenly lit up. When the zombie got closer, Mike clamped it tightly with his legs, cut the rope on his hands, and immediately jumped off the forklift. A burning zombie happened to ignite the gas pipe, and the sharp dagger flew straight towards the biker who was watching. At this moment, Lucy suddenly received bad news. The colonel said he had already sent people to the storage warehouse, but there were no survivors there. Lucy's heart sank. Could it be that Mike didn't make it? But then, Mike's phone rang, and he said he hadn't seen any support troops. Lucy immediately sensed something was wrong and advised Mike not to trust anyone. Then he quietly sneaked near the military camp. That lieutenant colonel wouldn't lie for no reason. The other side must be deliberately hiding something. Under the reminder of the epidemic prevention supervisor, Lucy took out the photo Mike had sent earlier, which recorded the shipping address of the ineffective vaccines. However, after checking, it was discovered that this address was actually the military headquarters. The supervisor was about to confront the colonel, but the next moment was knocked down by soldiers. Lucy sensed something was wrong and quickly recorded his findings on his phone, confirming that all those problematic vaccines came from the military. Lucy had just hidden the phone in the metal box when two soldiers rushed over with guns. In the quarantine zone, Mike was still thinking about how to rescue Kelly. Seeing the scattered zombies around, he deliberately revved the throttle to make a loud roar, seemingly trying to gather the creatures. Meanwhile, Kelly was equally tough, using a move called Monkey Steals the Peach to successfully free herself. But outside, it was full of Negan's henchmen, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape this den of evil. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Mike led a large group of zombies into the warehouse. Now the bike ledge couldn't care less about Kelly. Mike took the opportunity to rush to the second floor and use an electric weapon to knock down Negan. Kelly also took the opportunity to rush up and finish the attack. The two of them didn't dare to linger in battle and supported each other as they ran downstairs. Negan wanted to continue the chase but was entangled by Sister Jin, who had lost power. Before long, Mike and Kelly rode to the wall of the quarantine zone, only to find that Negan persistently followed them. Facing the guard's warning, he recklessly threw a smoke bomb. The area around the quarantine wall was quickly shrouded in mist, forcing the guards on the wall to stop shooting, allowing the zombies to approach continuously. Kelly guessed that Negan wanted to blow up the quarantine wall, so she immediately grabbed a weapon and rushed to stop him. If the zombies spread out, the whole world would face a catastrophic disaster. Who knew Negan's combat strength was terrifyingly strong, easily defeating the combined efforts of Mike and Kelly. He laughed wildly and threw an axe tied with explosives. The soldier guards were so frightened they ran away, but Mike fearlessly rushed forward, picked up the giant axe, and made a 720-degree throw, hitting Negan's back precisely. With a loud bang, this violent bandit was blown to pieces. Although the two successfully prevented the quarantine zone from being destroyed, unfortunately, they did not receive any special treatment. Mike eagerly charged his phone, and as soon as it was turned on, he received a message from Lucy. He quickly called back and finally found Lucy's phone in the metal box. Although he already knew the whole truth, he was powerless to stop the military's destruction plan. As shells fell one after another, the entire city quickly vanished to flames. That's all the content of Zombie Siege Watchtower. If you enjoyed it, please stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.